Welcome to episode 21 of Conversations with Women Living Well After 50. We all have a story to tell. Have you ever thought about writing down your life story or even what's happened in the last decade? My next guest in conversation today is coming up to a milestone birthday to celebrate. And she's been in a reflective mode and actually written a timeline of all the things that have happened in her life and the experiences over the last decade. I think it's a great idea that we write down our experiences, not just for ourselves to see what we've achieved and what challenges we've faced, but also for our family and friends and future generations, so they get to know who we are as a person and what we did in our life. My guest today is Debbie Harris, an award-winning blogger who lives in the small town of Tumbarumba in New South Wales, Australia. Married for 40 years with 3 grown-up daughters, Debbie and her husband, or the mathematician as she refers to him, are avid travellers, cyclers and adventurers. Described by others as a hummingbird on speed, this active mother and grandmother has also received a bravery award from the Queen. Today, Debbie joins me to share some of her stories and experiences and what it's like to reflect on life over the last decade. So let's go and join the conversation. Welcome, Debbie. It's lovely to have you join me here on Conversations.
It's lovely to be here, Sue.
Looks a beautiful day where you are down in Tumbarumba.
It is. It's a lovely spring, warm, sunny day.
Oh, that's lovely. And it always makes you feel good at springtime, I think.
This is my lovely sunroom, so I like to sit out here and enjoy the sunshine.
Yes, it's lovely. Okay, now when you're a friend of mine, and although we don't live nearby, I'm in a different state of Australia, but we met through blogging and developed a lovely friendship. And so I have an idea of what you get up to in life. And you're approaching a milestone birthday soon. And you mentioned to me that you had been looking back on the last decade, and you actually showed me or shared with me a copy of what you'd written. You'd gone back through your memories of each decade, and I think that's a great idea, and perhaps something that many of us don't think about, because it's a great way to document our life and to prompt us to remember the good and the bad times that we've had in life. So I wonder if we can start off talking about that. And if you could share your initial reflections on the changes that have occurred in your life over the last 10 years.
Yes. So the idea came to document the decade from turning 50 to 60 because so much has happened. And I'm not different to any other woman in this age group, I believe. I think that we all have highs and lows throughout the decade because we're in that middle. I have children with their young children. I have elderly parents who aren't well, and I'm going through this middle section. So I think many of us go through the ups and downs, but the first words that came to mind were intense, highs and lows, and volatile, and a lot of grief amongst that, as well as the happy bits, but an overwhelming sense of grief and mourning, not for my age, but for things that have happened to my family throughout that decade. Yeah.
Yes, and as you mentioned, we are what's termed the sandwich generation, aren't we? Because we've still got children, we've still got some of us are lucky enough to have our parents still with us, and you're sort of caught between the two, helping, and especially if your children have you've got grandchildren, and you sort of feel pulled in all directions. And it is a time of life where things do start to change, and ourselves. We're growing as women, but also around us. You know, you might lose a loved one, or things happen in life, and it can be quite challenging. And I think that it helps that we've got that little bit of maturity in coping with that. But I think, you know, many of us fear change, don't we? And it can become overwhelming at the thought of all these changes and what's happening. And perhaps looking back at your timeline, you probably wonder how you got through a lot of those situations. So what's your thoughts on change? How do you cope with things?
I think change, I cope with change better, I think, when I was younger, when I didn't know so much. I think as I get older, I know much more, I have more experience, I know what can go wrong. Whereas when I was younger, I just blithely went and did things. But
Yes.
change as I get older brings with it a lot more emotion and concern for the future, concern for family. I was made redundant when I was 56, which was a big change, and I didn't take that very well at all. 4 years down the track, it's all blended into the background, but at the time it was awful change, and I didn't want it. So I have fought change, but as you know, there's sometimes no point in fighting because it's going to come on you whether you like it or not.
Mm. And if we can just touch on that period of time, how did you feel? I mean, you had been in that position for, I think 20 odd years, if I recall. So that must have been difficult to accept, and also I think we feel that we're not wanted anymore, especially if it happens at that stage of life.
It came out of the blue, as most redundancies do. So I fought it as much as I could. I made myself sick, in fact, trying to fight for my staff and myself. I did everything I could to stop it from happening, but I couldn't stop it. So it did happen. But I was only 55. I was 56 by the time I finished. And I had that feeling of, what am I going to do now? And everyone kept saying things like, oh, there's always a silver lining. And I didn't want to hear about any silver linings. I wanted it to end, and to be done the way I wanted it to be. So in the end, I've had to accept it. And with everything that's happened in my life since then, I often wonder, how on earth could I have coped with everything that's happened in those years since if I was still working full time? So yes, they were right. There is a silver lining, but I didn't want anyone to say that. I was actually ready to smack someone in the mouth, the next person who said it, because I was so cranky. So that was a really big change for me. And I've also mourned then the loss of the contacts that I had, the relationships with my fellow staff, because I was teaching in a men's prison, which was an unusual and challenging environment in itself. But having lost all my staff, and then the connections that we had, even that daily chat, or when you have your hair done, somebody notices, you know, little things like that, that a workplace offers you a family. Suddenly I didn't have that.
No, and we spend so much time at work that they do become family. And I was talking to someone last week in an interview, and they were suggesting that when they left the workplace, you think you're going to keep in touch with everyone, but it doesn't necessarily work that way. And you sort of feel a little bit lost and a little bit isolated, because you've had these friendships that you've relied on, or that you've nurtured and have been such a big part of your life. And then because you don't have that link of the common link of your work environment, you lose those friendships, and that can leave a gap as well.
I heard that interview, and I at the time I was driving, and I thought, yes, that's a great point, because I'm lucky that most of my work colleagues still live in the same area, so we can stay in touch, but they've gone on to other jobs and other lives. So the bond that we had isn't as strong as it was. So, and I miss that. So blogging filled a big gap there for me, and I've now made a community of other blogging friends around the world. So that's helped to fill that gap somewhat.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. So I want to actually go back to a time earlier in your life, because we're talking about change and how we cope with change and also opportunities that come along. And I'd like to talk about when you and your husband Grant moved to your family to the UK.
Yeah. I look back at that, and I was only just 30. I had 3 young daughters, and we took up the opportunity to go to England for a year working on a teacher exchange. So we swapped our house, our job and our car and our life with an English family, and they came to our town here in Tamarama, and we went to live in their house in Cheddar in Somerset in England. Having never travelled with our 3 daughters anywhere overseas or on a plane, we just up and went. So at the time, it was fine, but I look back and I think, were we mad? And or were we geniuses? Were we taking the opportunity? And that has impacted on all of our lives since. The girls were 8, 6 and 3, but they all say that year away has had an impact on their life because we were able to travel, see different things. They've kept friendships. My daughter now lives back in the same village with her husband and child, little granddaughter. And so we've still got all the friendships around when we go to visit. It's like going to a second home. So it was an opportunity that came along and we just said, yes. So being younger and able to do that, we jumped at the chance to do it. And I don't know whether I would do it so willingly now. If I don't know, but it was a great thing to do. And I look back on it as a life-changing moment that we both got a lot out of.
Yeah, and I think that probably the next generation would be jumping at those opportunities these days. They wouldn't think about it. But in our time, it was a lot different then. And so something like what you and Grant did was such an adventure. I'm sure that people would have been saying, oh, you're crazy doing that, or what are you doing that for? You're uprooting the girls. Whereas they, it was such a fabulous experience for the children as well to move to another country. And fortunately, it wasn't that they spoke English. I mean, it was the UK, so that would have helped a little bit. But you would have been able to travel through Europe and places, and the girls would have had such a wonderful education on life in that year.
And we did everything on a shoestring budget because we were only being paid our Australian wage. So by the time it was converted to English, it was nothing. So we did it on a shoestring budget, as easy as we could, and just took every opportunity we could while we were there. So it was one of those moments that I'm glad we said yes.
Yeah. And I think when you said you might not do it now, I do believe that as we grow older, we do start to put restrictions on ourselves, even if we don't consciously do it. And you sort of give yourself pause, but you also we get those responsibilities of, as you said, you've got your parents, you also have your families that have had their own children, and it's not quite so easy to just say, well, we're going to up and go away for 12 months or whatever. So I think that you were lucky that you did take that opportunity. It was the right time.
The only way we could get the girls back to Australia, because they wanted to stay there, was to promise them we came back via Disneyland had 2 days or so in Disneyland, so that they would actually get on the plane to go home. We had to bribe them to come back.
Yeah. No, that's great. Now, I also was reading in your timeline that you and Grant are involved in the Rotary Club, and in fact, you were president of the club. But did you go to India for 3 weeks? Yeah, on a Rotary Friendship Exchange. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
exchanges in lots of forms have had a lot to do in our lives. So we've been on an teacher exchange. My husband went on a couple of more teacher exchanges to Denmark, and we accompanied him for those ones. They were quite short ones. We went on a Rotary Friendship Exchange to India, where we were hosted in the homes of the Indian Rotarians, and they took us around and showed us their country and their projects. It was an amazing experience. We were hosted by a lovely young family, and the mother decided that I would wear a different sari every day. Oh. So she would have the sari, and they would then dress me, and which was a big deal. They would dress me every day, and I would go wherever we were going in this sari, and it was unbelievable. So we got to travel, see India with locals, and then had a week on our own touring around afterwards. So it was one of those exchanges that we will always remember. And we've also hosted a lot of Rotary Exchange students. So we've had children from overseas coming to our house and to our family for a couple of months or a year, and become part of our family. And they're still part of our family today. So,
yeah, so being part of those types of organisations, and again, taking opportunities that come along, it really has enriched your life, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it hasn't all been great. Like with anybody's life, we all go through challenges, some more deeply than others. And you actually experienced a tragedy when you were on a school excursion back when you were a student. How do you think that experience influenced your outlook on life and how you handle what life has thrown at you over the last 50 years?
This was an accident that happened when I was 17 on a school excursion in my final year. We went to Noumea on a trip. I was one of 3 of the eldest students on the trip, and only 2 of us came back to Australia. Our friend drowned. The bus tipped down a cliff. We rolled into a river, and people drowned. I was thrown out of the bus as it rolled down the hill, and came back with lots of injuries. So my other friend and I were the oldest students, and some of the teachers were out of action. So we had to step up and take over the role of looking after these other younger students, 2 of whom had lost a brother or a sister on the trip. Yeah. So I had to grow up really quickly. I've learned from that never to take anything for granted. We don't know what's around the next corner. We don't know what's going to happen to us. I was lucky to survive. I came back with injuries. I had glass splattered throughout my body that had to be cut out after I'd come home because nobody had noticed it beforehand. I came back and had to do my Year 12 exams. Nobody gave me any support, no counselling. The school didn't make any allowances. I just had to carry on as if nothing had happened. But I had a friend, I'd been in this horrific accident. So things had changed. So I had to be resilient, and I had to get it from somewhere inside me. And I think I've carried that through in my life since then. I was nominated and received a bravery award from the Queen for my actions in the accident. None of that makes up for what we all went through and the friends that we lost, but it did teach me a lot about life.
Yes, I mean, at 17, I can't sort of grasp that concept of having to deal with that, and especially when you're away from in another country, not even in home. So that was a difficult time. But you've also, we've had COVID this year. You've had a few challenges over the last couple of years. What helps you to just cope with life and when you are challenged? What are some things that you do to try and help you get through them?
I think I try and be active. Up until this year, I was running and walking and riding my bike regularly. I've had an injury this year, though I haven't been able to run, and that's really curtailed my You know, as a runner, how you can just let yourself go and run. So I haven't been able to do that. I think blogging has helped. My family have helped. I talk to my family, and we're all very close and stay in touch. Friends, it's just hard, and I have, this year has been particularly hard with lots of family issues, and I have felt really low, on top of the bushfires in January where our house nearly burnt down. My daughter had a baby by 25 weeks last year in England. I can't get to see her now, though she's going well. My other grandson, my grandson has got some a rare genetic syndrome that is being tested. My other daughter's pregnant, so she has to be tested as well. I sometimes think, come on, give us a break. But just I have to keep going. I have to be strong, and somehow, as mothers and women, we get it from somewhere, or we don't, and we go down very fast. And just hope someone's there to help you to come back up.
Yes. Well, I know the challenges that you've been faced with this year in particular, and I'm always inspired by the fact that you do seem to just keep pushing through. When when the next problem or challenge comes along, you sort of go, oh God, not another one, but you just keep pushing through. And that's what I love about you. And I also love the fact that you wear orange, because and that's your favorite color, because that sort of lifts your spirits as well. But I did want to touch on a point about developing yourself. And this year you actually took a course, and I wanted to talk about that, because as women, we do find times in our life, especially if we're retired or and we're not sure what we want to do, or we just feel there's something missing. And I think for you, the course helped you in another way to overcome the challenges, because you had something else to focus on that was just for you. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the course and what you got out of it.
Well, it was good. My sister is an academic and often challenges me, and sent me a link to a writing course about writing children's picture books. And she said, this might be of interest to you. So I gave it a go and enrolled, and it really pushed me. I love writing, but I had to learn a different style of writing, with assignments and pressures and timelines. So it was a really good course to do, to open up my mind to something different, to take my focus away from other things. And there's so much that I learned that I didn't know. And I think we always seem to learn new things. We never stop learning, and pushing yourself to learn something new can be a way of developing yourself further, and taking that opportunity to try something new. I don't know if I'm ever going to do anything with the stories that I've written, but I know that I have got the basics there now. If I wanted to go further, I know what I have to do. So it's really good, especially during the pandemic, just to take my mind off other things and to push myself a bit, and just see where it took me. And it was a really, really good thing to do.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a different type of challenge, isn't it? I'm always learning. I love to learn new things. And yes, you're right. Sometimes what we're learning, we may not be going to follow a career path with, but it's always good to extend yourself. And it's good for our health and well-being as we get older. Our mental health and our brain health needs us to keep it challenged and to keep learning. And I think that was something that we all should strive to do, because it opens up our mind and it introduces us to new things in life. And
we're never too old to learn something new. So
exactly.
Just keep. And I am lucky, because I was financially able to do the course, to pay for it, and I had the time available and the resources. So I know that I am fortunate that way, to be able to do it.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to talk about too is that you and Grant are fairly active in your community pre-COVID. Not, you know, it's a bit hard when we're all social distancing, but I wanted you to tell me about the what you were involved with Tumbarumba. That, yeah.
The main thing at the moment that we've been involved in the Tumbarumba to Rosewood Rail Trail. So we've been on a committee for years in getting the old railway tracks, which were closed off and overgrown and just rotting, made into a walking and shared path. And it finally had opened this year. It's just a COVID time, so we couldn't have an opening. And we've been amazed at the number of people that are coming to ride the rail trail, given the restrictions as well. The local families in the area, while the lockdown was on, were able to get out safely with their children, somewhere out in the out fresh air. And I'm able to cycle about 40 or 50 kilometres a day along the rail trail without any problem at all. So it's been great for the town. And I was in town this morning and everyone's saying how busy it is because of people getting out and about. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful thing for the town, especially after the bushfires earlier in the year. Once COVID restrictions are lifted, I think we'll see even more people coming to the area. And so it's keeping history alive. It's an active family, safe activity for families to do. It's pretty, and it's a good way of staying fit. Yeah, and we might be able to use it for a marathon run because it's 42 kilometres.
Oh, okay.
And back. So that's a thing down the track we might be able to do. But it's including things like the Historical Society, the Men's Shed. Everybody's out helping us make it work. Yeah, so it's been great to be involved in.
Yeah. So you've really led such an interesting life. And I think that even yourself would be surprised when you start talking about it, and because we don't often think about what we've done and what we've achieved, do we? And that's why I think your idea of writing the timeline was such a good one. So I want to ask you now what you're most looking forward to turning 60, because it's only a couple of months away.
That's right. I've written down a few things like, because I have got it on my blog, I had a list of 12 things to do before I turned 60. So I've been ticking things off on my list, but things like finally just accepting myself for who I am, not who people think I am or who they want me to be. It's silly, isn't it, that you get to nearly 60 and you still feel that you should be behaving a certain way or whatever. So adjusting my expectations of myself so that I don't put too much pressure on myself to just be in the moment more. Rather than have everything planned out. Learning new things, so I'll continue to do that. I want to do more travel. We've travelled a lot in our life. We want to do more of that. And to be an active part in our grandchildren's lives. I think they just bring so much joy that I want able to spend time. So physically and mentally be well enough to be able to be with them in years to come and see them and grow. So I also don't realise that I'm turning 60, because when I used to think of someone turning 60, they were old people.
And we're not, are we?
No. My husband's he's the same age as you. And he said, it's no big deal, but it's a number, but it's not old anymore. We can do so much.
Well, that's right. Well, as you know, I'm 63 and I ran a full marathon last weekend, and people would go, "Oh, you're crazy," but you train for it. But I think that, again, you just don't put those limiting beliefs on yourself. And I'm like you. I don't think of myself as a number. You just think, "Oh, I'd like to try that," and off you go. And I think also I agree with you. If someone asked me what I wish I could possibly change, is that I wish I could have been more confident in myself and not worried about what other people thought. a lot earlier in my life rather than waiting. And I've got to say that, you know, people talk about turning 50 and you know, you change and you grow. But for me, I don't think I became wise until I was 60. And things have changed since I turned 60. I feel more comfortable with who I am as a person. I started the podcast and, you know, not really worried what other people thought about that. It was in the past, I would have thought, oh, I can't do that because, you know, what will people think? Or what if it doesn't work? And I think that you just get to that lovely point in life where if you do feel comfortable with you as a person and who you are, it's just such a great time of life.
And you are an inspiration to all of us. So it's great to be able to follow along with what you're doing. I think it's great.
Well, I think I said this to some my running friends on the weekend. I think that we're all inspirational to someone, and I don't think we realise that. We look at ourselves and we go, "Oh, we're just so and so going about our life," but we don't know when we're inspiring or motivating someone else. And I think it's important to be a role model, and especially to our family and our grandchildren. And as you say, you want to keep healthy to enjoy them. So I think as for being inspirational, I think everyone is in their own way. And I'm always inspired by my guests that come on the show. It's I just love that. That's one of the rewards I have for hosting the podcast, is meeting women who are interesting and have a story to tell, and just inspirational to me with what they've achieved in their life.
But I think everyone has a story to tell. You just got to be asked about what your story is, or share parts of it.
That's exactly right. And I mentioned that in the introduction, that we all have a story. Some of us don't take the time to think about our story. And I think that you do get to this time of life and it's the perfect opportunity. We've had many life experiences, and I mean, I've learnt things about you today that you're a friend of mine, but I didn't know about, and you continue to surprise me, which is great. So that's really good. But what I want to do finally, before we finish, I just want to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests, and you probably have touched on it a little bit, but what does being a woman living well after 50 mean to you?
Well, I think it's about letting the inner child within us out from time to time. Yes, life is serious, and yes, there's been a lot of ups and downs throughout our lives, but there's still a child in us, and we've got to have fun and explore that in any way we can. My word of the year this year is jump, as you might know. So every month I do an update post on what I've been doing about jumping during the month. And sometimes it's hard to do, but I also try and get a photograph of me jumping. And I love jumping in puddles. I love jumping for the sake of jumping. I love throwing autumn leaves up and having them rain down over me. And some people might look at me and think, oh God, she's just gone mad. But that's part of living a life well lived, is having fun and letting that child come out. I also shared a quote today on my Facebook page that says, the longer I live, the more beautiful life becomes. I think that sums it up beautifully as well.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, when you bring that inner child out, you're focusing on the things that bring you joy. And that's what we tend to lose sometimes, because we get too busy and life throws curveballs at us, and we forget to just drill it back and think about what brings joy, what brings fun and laughter to our life. And I know for me it's going on a swing, because when I was younger I used to love my swing in the backyard, and I'd be singing at the top of my voice, and eyes closed, and I'd spend many hours with that. And now whenever I take my grandsons to the park, I love going on the swing, and it just brings back beautiful memories. And yeah, so that's a lovely answer. And what I do also love, and I've said before, is with all my interviews, I get different interpretations, which is great. I love hearing that answer from women because everyone interprets it differently, and it's not just the well, we need our health and our wellness, which we do, but there's so much to a life well lived, as you said. So you know, that's a lovely answer. So are there any thoughts that you'd like to leave with us today?
No, I think it's just all about learning to be true to ourselves, and I'm not a proponent of fake it till you make it, but if you've got to try and be positive, even though I feel sometimes like one of those balls or those things that get knocked down and keeps popping up.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I think, yeah, I could just stay down, but I'm going to keep popping up, and that's a positive attitude I try to get myself into, and it works most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time it does. So
that's what I love about you. You keep bouncing back. And so I would invite the listeners to pop over to Deb's World. We'll be putting the links to her website and social media in the show notes. And Deb's a great photographer as well, which she didn't mention, but I love looking at her photos on Instagram, and she's always in photo challenges and just so creative. So pop over, say hello to Deb, read her blog, which is always full of joy and adventures, and you always feel uplifted after I've read your blog. So do that. And for those of you that are listening to the podcast, I'd love you to leave a review and a comment and give me some feedback, and also subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a conversation. You might like to also share it with a friend today who may benefit from the topic we've talked about. We've talked about change, how we change and accept the challenges in life, how we cope with change, and also we've talked about bringing out that inner child and enjoying our life despite what life throws at us. So I hope you've enjoyed the conversation today. I know I have. So thanks, Deb, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sue. That was good.
Yeah, we'll have to do that again. And until next time, everyone, remember to embrace and enjoy life every day. Bye for now.